mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 2 of HBO's Barry, entitled Limonada. This show continues to do a great job of balancing juggling this delicate balance between hilarity and these intense scenes with deep meaning. I think on one hand you can look at this episode as focusing on love, right? You got the love between, or the love expressed. Let me put it that way: the love expressed between Gene and Barry, between Barry and Sally, between Hank and Cristobal. But I think more so, if you look at if you look at this on a, I don't want to say a deeper level, but maybe just like a different way, this episode, I think more so revolves around abuse and how people can react to it. So I'm going to go through and talk about give a couple of examples of that I think I saw in this episode. And you guys can let me know in the comments if you agree, if you think it's a more of a love kind of episode. But I feel like this is taking an abuse direction that could play out throughout the course of the season as it pertains to how Barry grapples with his trauma and then potentially inflicts or creates trauma for others. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those scenes, and we'll talk about the B plot, and then I'll have a couple of thoughts. So when Barry goes to ask Sally to give Gene a job on her show, she refuses, saying that essentially what everyone says in this episode is that Gene is kind of like burned bridges in Hollywood and he's a piece of shit and no one wants to work with him. And Barry blows up. And this scene is intense. It's incredible to me just how my opinion on Bill Hader has changed between when I first saw him on SNL and when I watch him now on Barry. That was a fucking crazy scene. And I think just having seen Bill Hader in so many things that are so different from this, to see him reach that level of intensity in this scene was crazy. And then it kept escalating, and I loved when, well, I didn't love it, but I love it artistically. But in the moment, I'm like, holy shit. When he starts to yell at her and then she laughs, oh my God. The way he blew up on her and just kind of cornered her like that and screamed at her. Oh man, that was intense. And he does this in front of a room of other women, mind you, and only women. There were no men in this room. There were only women in this room. And he does this, and they scurry off because they're like, yo, what the fuck is this? And then one of the actresses later shows concern for Sally. She's like, yo, this guy's clearly abusive or has violent tendencies. And the other women are kind of just like, yeah, but we can't really prove that. Or, oh, did he hit her? No. Did he throw something? No. We can't really do anything. And it's very much, I think this is the first example of how someone can respond to abuse. Because that was clearly an abusive situation. Even though it wasn't physical, it was solely verbal. That was still a very abusive situation. And then you have these two women who were there and saw it, kind of taking a I ain't in it kind of approach to it. And I'm not drawing any conclusions or casting any blame or judging anyone that involved in this scene in any kind of way. I'm just pointing out that this is one way in which abuse can be, how one can react or respond to abuse. And in this case, these two women, they didn't seem, I don't want to say they didn't seem concerned. I think all three women were equally concerned. It's just that the one actress on the show seemed concerned to the point of hey, I think we should do something. And the other two were concerned, but to the point of, I don't really want to get involved. So I thought that was an interesting one way to look at how someone might reply to abuse. And then Sally's reaction is entirely different. You would think that if we look at episode 1, those two seem to have a very dry kind of relationship in how they interacted with one another. With her asking him to come up there to bring the flowers, and he's not really paying attention. He's mad about his video game controller. Like I said last week, she seemed very much kind of like a diva. They just didn't really seem to have much chemistry going on. But then after he does that, what does she do? She gets him spaghetti. She has a donut out there. She has beer. She buys him a new controller. He calls and she apologizes to him, which prior to Barry's blow up, I felt like her reaction to his request was not the best. but not to the point where she needs to be apologized as if she's responsible for creating that situation. And her being attacked like that in a verbal sense and then responding with, I want to make him feel better so he doesn't do that again. Like, that was scary. So let me, it's like she snapped, like snapped into like this realization, like, holy shit, this guy just scared me. Let me make sure I'm doing everything to keep him happy so that that doesn't happen again. And it makes you do things like apologize when you're not in the wrong. And I think that's a second example of how someone can respond to abuse. And Barry calls her, and he acts like it never even happened. Like, he doesn't even remember it really. And I think that's another sign of not just, in this case, how an abuser responds to abuse that they just did, but I think it also speaks to Barry's like PTSD from his time in the military. Kind of like, he's like to where he could kind of like separate himself from those sorts of things, or like that to him did not read as problematic, whereas to anyone else with eyes it would. And I think he's found a way to kind of shut himself off from that. So again, another great example of how I think people respond to abuse. And then we see this dynamic at play again with Barry and Gene, right? Because Barry keeps saying that everything he's doing to Gene, mind you, not for Gene, and these are my words, not Barry's, but everything he's doing is to Gene and not for Gene. But he says he does this all out of love. Because he loves him, he put him in this trunk of his car while he was, for what was probably hours, by the way. He constantly has this threat of killing Gene kind of looming over him. And then at the end, once he's escaped, what does Barry do? He shows up at his son's house prior to Gene getting there, and then threatens the lives of his son and grandson, and then follows that up with saying that he loves him and asks him to say it back. And again, now I think this is like the third example of how someone can respond to abuse, because Gene's been abused this entire episode, and then at the end of the episode, what does he end up doing? He ends up telling Barry that he loves him. After he's done all the things that I just mentioned to him, he tells him that he loves him because he's being abused and he has no way out of this. And I just think there's so many interesting reactions and responses to Barry's behavior, including from Barry himself in this episode, that I think really made this episode stand out. This show does such a great job of having moments like these with counterbalancing some of the comedy, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But there's also a B plot in this episode, and involves Cristobal and NoHo Hank, and the title of the episode is Limonada, and that's because at the start of the episode, or toward the start of the episode, Cristobal sees like a lemonade stand across the street from his house, and he asks if they're selling it. And as he goes to buy some, these SUVs pull up, and this guy Fernando gets out, and he's apparently the head of their crime family. And they seem very jovial, but at the end of the day, this guy is saying that Cristobal is struggling because of the Chechens, and we know him and Hank are having a thing, but their criminal enterprises are at odds with one another. And this guy goes to do a hit, I guess, I guess we'll say do a hit, or at least shoot up or whatever Hank's spot, and he's not there because Cristobal warned him. But what ends up happening is that Cristobal's like, look, man, like, this guy Fernando is not with the shits, man. You like do not fuck with him. You gotta run. And essentially he breaks up with him and tells him to leave. So I don't know how that's gonna play out necessarily. I think we'll probably have your general kind of dynamic of two guys who are on opposite ends of a spat, but are still having feelings for one another. That kind of complex dynamic, I think we'll see that at play. But I also feel like this is somehow going to push Hank back toward Barry, or pull Barry back into a situation with Hank. So we'll see. But while this episode had a lot to say about trauma, Barry's trauma that he has, and that Barry's trauma that he inflicts, it also managed to again, like I said, balance that humor with these great moments. And even though it was predictable, I really like the opening sequence where Barry gives Gene food while he's still in the trunk, like out in the open. Like, because when he's ordering the food, as soon as he starts to walk out, I'm like, and the way they had the shot framed, where it's like this woman is sitting at the table in the foreground and you can see his car in the background, I'm like, that truck's gonna pop open. He's gonna give him the food right there in the open. And they play with this another time where he's yelling at Gene in the back, right in front of someone, and these people are not not replying or responding anyway. I thought that was a good bit of visual comedy work there. I also liked when, before Barry blew up on her, when he first shows up at Sally's set, and she's like, Did I forget that I invited you here? He's like, no, this is actually a surprise visit. I like how that they kind of threw back to the idea that she sets up these situations, like she fabricates these situations, like like you create spontaneity. Like, oh, here's my spontaneous boyfriend who loves me here to give me something, and you planned it out the whole time. I like how she's like, yeah, did I plan this? Like, wait, you're actually surprising me? I also like when every time Barry goes to request a job for Gene, like the way these casting directors shit on him and his history. And I particularly like the one where he was talking to the two guys, and the one guy said something like, isn't he the guy that brought a gun to a Full House audition? Something like that. I thought that was really funny. He said somebody called somebody a dirty witch for not casting him in something. That part wasn't funny, but the idea of bringing a gun, like, who came up with that? Like, let's say he brought a gun to a Full House audition. But that was great. I also liked when Gene said he wouldn't go to the police, and Barry said you're a terrible actor, while he's actively trying to get Gene some work. I thought that was a great line. And then a good, I think, visual gag was when after Gene has escaped out of Barry's car and he runs into the backyard of this house, and we see these two women in the middle of a breakup, and he runs by and their motion sensor lights come on. They don't see this. He tries to climb the fence, and then you hear the dog, and he's like, oh shit, he's got a dog running up on him. And then you just see like dog after dog run by this window. And I'm looking like, there's gotta be like 30 dogs. And then the women are discussing why they're breaking up. She's just like, you have too many dogs. It was a perfectly timed line. And I thought that was good because, like, also too, you think this guy gets attacked by 30 dogs, he's not gonna be okay. And then they have him like almost cartoonishly mangled, like all his clothes have tears in him and he's dirty. Like that would be how you would look if you got attacked by 30 dogs. Like, no, you wouldn't look like that. But it was like if Daffy Duck got attacked by 30 dogs, that's how he would look. But anyway, I thought this was a great episode. Like I said, I love the commentary on abuse or love or trauma or whatever you choose to look at, what you think this episode was trying to tell you. And I love how they continue to balance that with the humor. So again, a great season of Barry so far, 2 episodes in. I'll be back next week for episode 3. And until then, peace.